I'll go ahead and introduce folks and I'll turn it over to you, Ryan. So hi everybody, it's Leanne. Some of you I know, some of you I'm really excited to get to know more. Thank you so much for attending our Venture Cafe virtual lunch break session. We started to do these lunch breaks because, I mean, let's be real. Sometimes you need a bit of a break from the Zoom conference calls. And just to give you guys a little bit of lay of the land, I see some folks that have been here before for our prior lunch break sessions. It's designed to be, first we have some guest speakers that I'll allow Ryan to kind of introduce, but then we open it up for a really interactive conversation where we'll be able to have a really good back and forth two-way communication about our topic du jour. And so Passport is a program that is funded and powered by Knight Foundation, and it's really focusing on helping to get Main Street entrepreneurs opportunities to scale their ventures in a cohort-based model without having to enroll in an accelerator or an incubator program, really tapping into networks and resources that may not otherwise be accessible to them. And so as part of our pivot in Passport, given the coronavirus and COVID-19 kind of epidemic, we are hosting these lunch break sessions to really give a space for sharing best practices, getting to know about resources that are out there, and just also having a time to vent and learn about what's going on with other food and beverage entrepreneurs. So I am super excited today to have a really great slate of presenters and co-facilitators of this conversation, organizations that we've partnered with before, organizations that we're looking forward to partnering with more deeply with Passport. So we've got representatives from the Downtown Development Authority, we've got the Greater Miami Convention and Visitors Bureau, FIU Hospitality, and I see in the back one of my favorite restaurants in Miami, literally my favorite, the crispy skin snapper with the beurre blanc and Sancerre is like my go-to at Mignonette. But we've got Ryan Roman, a fellow attorney, although I'm a recovering attorney, a fellow attorney, but also food and beverage entrepreneur. So thanks for joining. Ryan, I'm going to turn it over to you to kick off the conversation and to give a deeper introduction of our presenters.
Thanks, Leanne. Like Leanne mentioned, my name is Ryan Roman. I'm an attorney by day. I'm a commercial litigator at a firm called Ackerman. And I am also a co-owner, along with Danny Surfer, who I see in the chat, of Mignonette, an oyster bar that's located in Miami's Edgewater neighborhood. And also Vinaigrette Sub Shop, which we opened more recently in the DuPont building in downtown Miami. So we're here to talk about tactics and resources to sustain the food and beverage industry. First, let me introduce our panelists. First, we have Connie Kennard, and Connie is the Vice President of Multicultural Tourism and Development at the Greater Miami Convention and Visitors Bureau. Connie leads the department in efforts to promote Miami's multicultural neighborhoods, attractions, and events. And I'm looking forward to hearing from Connie today. Next, we have Michael Chang, who is the Dean of the Chapin School of Hospitality and Tourism Management at FIU. And among other things, the School of Hospitality is a partner in the South Beach Wine and Food Festival. And you'll be hearing today about the relief fund that they've set up. Finally, we've got Kevin Ruiz from the Downtown Development Authority. Kevin's the senior manager of business development, and Kevin oversees the business development team, and he implements retention and recruitment strategies for the DDA. So I'd like to start by talking about the relief programs that are available for the food and beverage industry in South Florida. As you know, there are national programs like the Payroll Protection Program that have received a lot of attention, both positive and negative. But today we wanted to focus on local relief efforts. So I'd like each of you to tell us about the relief programs that your organizations are spearheading or are involved with. And Connie, if you could kick that off for us. Oh, I think you're still muted, Connie, sorry.
I am still muted, yes, thank you, thank you. And first, thank you for bringing this conversation together. Happy to be a part of it. At the Greater Miami Convention and Visitors Bureau, one of the first things, excuse me, we recognize, go to the next person. I gotta get some water.
All right, we'll come back to you, Connie.
Okay.
All right, Dean Cheng, why don't you tell us about what FIU and the School of Hospitality are doing right now?
Sure. Thank you, Ryan. Well, FIU, we're the anchor institution in Miami, so we felt that we had to do something. And for almost 50 years now, the Chaplin School of Hospitality and Tourism Management, we've educated and we continue to educate students and future tourism and hospitality industry leaders all over the world. So when we saw what was happening in the hospitality industry, we immediately jumped to action. We felt we had to take action to help those in the industry that our current students want to be a part of. We also had to show our students the importance of taking action and helping our community. And we wanted to give back to some of those people who have given our students internships, their first jobs, and have supported our South Beach Wine and Food Festival. So within 5 days of deciding that we're going to take action, we launched the South Beach Wine and Food Festival and FIU Chaplin School Hospitality Industry Relief Fund with a $500,000 founding donation from the Chaplin School, which came from the proceeds of the 2020 South Beach Wine and Food Festival. And our industry partners, Bacardi USA and Badia Spices, matched it. So then together with Lee Schrager, the South Beach Wine and Food Festival team, and Southern Glazers Wine and Spirits, we've raised over $1.4 million today, along with other supporters like Shaw Ross, Volley 305 Vodka, Greater Miami Convention and Visitors Bureau, the Downtown Development Authority, as well as individuals like Emilio and Gloria Estefan. Beyond the immediate financial relief, we're also doing recovery initiatives for employees of these businesses through our food and beverage programming that we'll be offering for free from Startup FIU Food and our newly created Bacardi Teach program, which is from our new Bacardi Center of Excellence at the Chaplin School, our partnership with Miami Chefs Academy, and our online learning provider Tipsy. So participants will have 6 months of access to workshops on technical skills, financial skills, entrepreneurship, and so on. And they'll get a FIU certificate once they complete these modules as well. So this relief fund is intended to help employees of the independently owned and operated restaurant and bars in Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach counties. The intention is that the money is to be used to help them to pay those displaced workers and really to help those who have helped us in the past. So grants of up to $15,000 are available per business on a first come, first served basis. And the application is through the business owner, but the money is intended to be given directly to the employees, up to $500 per person.
Thanks, Dean Cheng. And where do people go to find this information? Is it all on the website?
There's 2 locations. It's on the South Beach Wine Food Festival website, sobeWFF.org, or our FIU Chaplin School website, which is hospitality.fiu.edu. Or if they want to text, it's also, you could text FIU SOBEWFF, FIU SOBEWFF 241444. So there's 3 different ways that you can continue to help.
Great, thank you. Connie, I see you're back. Do you want to tell us a little bit about the GMCVB's programming?
Absolutely, that was so crazy. Yeah, so thank you for having us here. One of the first things we did at the Convention Bureau is to form a program called Miami Eats. And what it was is, of course, the restaurants had to close as far as the inside, but they didn't have to not do their delivery or their takeout. And a lot of restaurants were easily prepared to roll into doing that. So what we did is we called restaurants to see, number one, if they were doing that. And then I think also us calling around encouraged restaurants to do it as well. And we started a database showcasing all those restaurants that were open. At this point, I think we're over about 1,200 restaurants under our Miami Eats program. But the deal was that program turned around within a matter of days because it was really crucial that we looked at something that could help the efforts very quickly. In addition to that, one of the focus, of course, we called all of the restaurants. This activity is not about partnership or membership of the Convention Bureau. It's about all of the restaurants in our community. So we did, being our department is multicultural, in addition to that, we made sure we reached out to some of our neighborhoods as well. Some of those businesses that may or may not, are engaged as much with us, and sometimes maybe don't get the message about some of the programming. So we did make special calls to make sure Little Havana, some of the restaurants are in that, Little Haiti, Overtown. And so we're proud of that, and we've had good feedback, and hopefully that it helped in the interim for some of the restaurants. We also partnered on a program. If you look on our website, you will see where you can also provide meals for some of the first line responders, some of those restaurants. So if you wanted to bless one of the first line responders, you could do that through our Miami Eats program as well. So that was probably our initial project as far as food and beverage.
Thanks, Connie.
You're welcome.
And Kevin, could you tell us a little bit about what the DDA has been up to?
Sure. First, I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to showcase some of what we've been working on. Michael and Connie, those are great initiatives. I really am impressed about the collective response that everyone is kind of doing right now. To give you a little bit of background about the DDA, which I hope frame what we've been doing, we were founded in 1967, and we're a semi-autonomous economic agency of the city of Miami, and our mission is to grow, strengthen, and promote the economic vitality of our urban core. So our district is 3.8 square miles. Easy way to think of it on a east-west basis is east of the Metro Rail and the Bright Line to the water, and then it starts at southeast 15th all the way up to northeast 24th. So it includes Mignonette and Vinaigrette, Ryan and Daniel. We have a board of 15 members, 12 of which are private citizens that either live or operate a business within our district. And they basically come up with policy that we then implement. So there's a 24-person staff, and we do everything from business development, which is what my team does, to advocacy and operations, marketing, planning and design, and enhanced services. That last one is those people wearing the purple and orange shirts that walk around the district, cleaning up, making it look presentable for both citizens, patrons, and business owners. So to tell you a little bit what we've been working on, the first initiative we pushed out like almost immediately when all this went into effect was our Go Local campaign. You go to miamidda.com/DDA-go-local-program. We maintained a list very much like the GMCVB of all open businesses within our district that are restaurants, so people know how and where they can order from. We also included a program where we have 25 signed up this far, but if you call the restaurant directly, patrons get 10% off. So that incentivizes them to call the restaurants. But it also winds up saving the restaurants money because these third-party apps are charging anywhere from 25 to 35%. So it enables them to keep a larger margin, and also allows them to convert some of their wait staff that they may have laid off into delivery drivers, or putting them there for point of pickup. If you guys know of any restaurants that want to participate, you can email golocal@miamidda.com. Second thing we did is we paired with Michael and FIU. I won't go into that in too much detail because he covered it wonderfully, but very proud of that. Within the DDA, 72 establishments have received grants this far, averaging almost $2,400 per establishment. So very happy about that. Third thing we did was we partnered with Help Main Street. So you can go to helpmainstreet.com/MiamiDDA. Super simple. It's a place where you can find businesses that are selling gift cards and give them a cash infusion. And lastly, we basically were a facilitator of information. A lot of things are out there right now that are super confusing in terms of how to apply, when to apply, who qualifies. So we formed a loan assistance task force. So if you email loanassistance@miamidda.com, we actually have about a dozen or so volunteers that are accountants and attorneys that are volunteering their time and helping people file what they need to file to try to apply for things like the PPP. And I really want to mention specifically, just because it's super timely, on 12/4, there are 3 local initiatives that the city of Miami is opening up. The first one is the Small Business Emergency Loan Program. So that's a $600,000 fund that just got approved, and they're giving out loans which can become forgivable under certain conditions between $5,000 and $20,000. Another one is the Business Continuity Microenterprise. That is for smaller businesses for up to 5 employees, grants of up to $10,000. And then third one is the Emergency Rental and Utility Assistance Program. where someone that's living within the area, so for example, someone within hospitality that got laid off or furloughed, can receive a one-time payment of up to $1,500 to assist with rent. So all that information is on our website. At the conclusion of this, we'll circulate all the links because I know it's confusing and I'm talking very fast and I don't want to take up too much more time. So that's what we've been up to.
Thanks, Kevin. I guess my first question for the group, and Dean Chang, why don't I start with you? What's one thing about Miami's food and beverage community that's giving you optimism right now?
You know, when I think about this, I think it really is the entrepreneurial spirit that we see in Miami. You know, we really do have within the fabric of Miami this drive, this determination, and this can-do attitude. You know, if we got a great idea, we can make it happen. It's just, that's what makes Miami so great. And I think that's what makes our culinary scene in Miami so attractive. We're seeing a lot of Michelin star chefs coming in and opening up locations in Miami. I mean, we even have a James Beard Foundation award-winning writer at the Miami Herald. So I think this whole thing about Miami is just the entrepreneurial spirit that you can see all over the city.
And Connie, what's giving you optimism right now?
Yeah, definitely. I agree with Dr. Shane as well, the can-do attitude. If you watch some of the restaurants, and we try to, of course, as probably we all do, I try to follow all our stakeholders and restaurants on my social media. I want to kind of keep up with what's going on with them. And I see positive action and ideas and we're open and ingenuity, if you will. One of the things we are also doing is reaching out to some of those restaurants and businesses as well. So we're able to, talk to them and engage. And it is that attitude. I also think that, and I think forums like this are great. The restaurants see that the community, the government, and the political structures and organizations like ours really are concerned. We're all in this together. So I think the optimism, with situations like this that are bad situations, there's always that flip side that the community comes together. And my hope is that coming together for the restaurants and for all of us will continue to inspire hope.
Thanks, Connie. And Kevin, are you seeing anything in the downtown community that's giving you cause for hope?
Yeah, absolutely. So first thing I would say is, if I were to use a word to describe it, is resiliency. Restaurateurs are being scrappy, they're being innovative, they're doing a lot with a little, especially during the circumstances. So for example, within our district, Balance and Piola are two, which started selling household essentials, which in the very beginning was actually kind of crazy, but they were selling things like toilet paper and just like basic, super simple household products that you just couldn't get. So I thought that was a really brilliant idea. And then just to piggyback off Connie, I think it's an example of the community. So you're seeing corporate partners, institutions of higher learning like FIU, nonprofits, economic development offices, local governments, patrons, all these people are coming together in an effort to support, which is to support the hospitality industry, which is by far and away the industry that's been hit the hardest during this pandemic. So a sense of resiliency and community for sure are two things that have been exhibited within the district.
Yeah, and I think what Connie said regarding the community and what Kevin said too, that's really key. In the very first days after all these closures started happening, there was a couple of chefs who said, we need an employee relief fund. And they just went out and bootlegged it, they just started it through GoFundMe. And I was like, wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they've raised over $100,000 just through that effort alone.
Yeah.
I know behind the scenes, we're seeing a lot of communication, really honest communication about financial situations, what's working and what's not. Before this came along, restaurant owners were not notorious for sharing bad news with one another. Everything was always great. Everything was always profitable, even when it wasn't. Now we're actually talking about where we're losing money, and we're just trying to figure out what's working and what doesn't work. Everyone made some really tough decisions in the restaurant community when this first hit. Danny and I decided we would close down the restaurants, evaluate where we were, and see if we can get open again. We thought that if we spent our last dollar trying to fight to stay open, that we would never really be able to survive this and get open again on the other side. But other places, put their heads down, kept working, and decided to fight through it. And so the communication about what was working and what wasn't working, I think, was extremely helpful during this time. And then I think the other thing that gave me a lot of optimism was how quick we were to provide meals for employees who have been laid off, for frontline workers, just the amount of charitable giving I think we're seeing from a community in the restaurant world that's already very strapped and is bearing the brunt of this, how quick people were to give what they did have to others. So I think that's been great as well.
Yeah, I think all those communication also led to new partnerships and new collaborations. Because I know this weekend, Temple Street Eatery is collaborating with Takiza on doing a Cinco de Mayo thing, and they already had the menu, and it's just like two of my favorite places, and I want to go. I go pre-order and get the food.
That does sound pretty good. All right, well, Kevin, why don't I start with you on this next question? If you could see one thing change in the food and beverage community as a result of this pandemic, what would you want that to be?
Yeah, so I think there's two things that I've seen so far that I would love to see carried out. The first is time back to the Go Local campaign, an increase in in-house delivery or offering delivery. And in theory, that enables the restaurant to earn higher margins because you're avoiding those third-party apps, which in turn might increase or benefit the staff with more hours, more tips, possibly higher wages. So that's something I'd like to see in theory. Also an increased emphasis on Go Local. So within our district, which is kind of an urban core, roughly half of these restaurants and bars are local establishments. They're not chains. So I want to see that from a patron standpoint, but also from a purveyor standpoint. So if all these restaurants are sourcing local and all these patrons are patronizing local establishments, then the money stays local. So it's just kind of a cycle. I know for me, since once this started, I've had the blessing of at least trying to order delivery once a day, if not every other day, to try to help these restaurants out. I mean, these are places I love, and I don't want to see them go away and be replaced by 1,000 different chains. There's other places like that in our state, in our county, and I think that's great. But I think part of what makes our urban core in Miami so special is that local flavor, and I don't want to see that go away.
Thanks, Kevin. Connie, what would you want to see as a change to come out of this that you think would be a positive for the community?
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the changes that overall we'll see with the restaurants and we'll all have to be prepared is the sanitation or the perceived sanitation now that will have to happen as we move forward. Restaurants will have to look at that from a different standpoint and think very proactively about it and know that could cause somebody not to be a visitor in their restaurant or establishment. So all that to say, I think that everyone will have to take a harder look and a sustainable look at what that looks like for their restaurant. And, I don't think that that's a bad thing at all. It's just, it kind of came at us very quickly, but it's something that I think is a positive thing that will come from this. And then they'll have to find the balance. And I think the other thing is that, just like personally, when things like this come up, the frame of having savings, with the 3 months, the 6 months that we should have, the good thing is that hopefully a lot of these restaurants will overcome this. It's a hard situation, but it will cause everybody, not just the restaurants, to look at their model for sustainability. And maybe adjust some things just in case something like this happens. I mean, it is what it is, but I think we all, even personally, sometimes can say, hey, if this happens again, I would have this would be done differently, or I would do this differently. So I think another good thing that will come out of this is that models of revenue and sustainability will be reevaluated.
I think those are great points, Connie, and something we think about a lot, Danny and I, have been, every few years, there's this sort of what we think is this once in a generation event or once in a decade event that completely wipes out our ability to make any money as a restaurant. And if that's happening every 2 or 3 years now between, even hurricanes, Zika, it's only going to, I believe, get amplified by climate change anyhow. So these are going to become more common, more extreme events. The business model just doesn't work for that. We can
Right.
only survive when it's a sunny day, not when it's a rainy day. And we need to revamp the model so that on a rainy day, yeah, times are tough, but we can still survive.
Right.
Dean Chang, what about you? What are you seeing changing, and what do you want to change as a result of this?
Well, I like to talk more about what Kevin had mentioned, you know, the emphasis on the locally owned and operated restaurants. I think they really, going back to my earlier comment, really make up the fabric of our industry here in Miami. I mean, the cuisine, the authenticity, and the passion and the craft you see behind the owners and the chefs, and all the joy that comes along with it. You know, and what this pandemic has done is really show us and everybody else the challenges they face too. So if anything, it's really put more emphasis and spotlight on them, you know, what it takes to own a restaurant, but how we also have to continue to support it. So like Kevin, we've been eating out a lot, you know. Like, I can't wait for us to go back to near normal so my eating bill reduces. You know, but and then the second thing I thought of too is we have to learn how to find ways to diversify our revenue stream and our business model. We cannot just, you know, like a full service casual dining restaurant without a dining room is basically you're screwed. So you have to find a different way of bringing in different sources of revenue. So like what you mentioned, the marketplaces, a takeout model, pop-ups, those kind of things. I think we'll learn from that, but we'll get better at it.
Yeah, thanks, Dean. So one of my, I think, biggest anxieties right now is the period of time when we've exhausted our collective attention span, and restaurants are expected to survive after this period where there's relief available to us. What can be done over the coming months for restaurants? And, we might have to limit our seating capacity, or we're going to see a dramatic reduction in demand. How can your organizations help us 3 or 4 months down the road when the public attention span has moved on? We're no longer going to have as many relief funds available. Talk us through some of that. And Dean Chang, do you want to kick that off for us?
That's I wish I had the answer for that one, but I think at this point here there's going to be some guidelines issued from the mayors soon. Since our governor has issued those, and I think we're going to be next. So it's really paying attention to what those guidelines say we can and cannot do, but also being creative with it. So, there's a lot of concern about high touch surfaces, like door handles being potential hot spots and hot zones, and you got to constantly clean that. And some of the recommendations I've seen is automatic door openers, or hiring a staff to open the door every time somebody walks in. Or you could just go cheap and just prop the door open, and problem solved. People don't have to touch the handle when they walk in. So it's just like thinking outside the box there in those kind of situations. But 3 to 4 months down the road, I'm thinking it's really the growth and sustain period. We've done everything we're doing a lot today to help relief and on the recovery process. But what else can we do to help them continue to sustain that path? So that's a lot to. I don't have the answer for that one at the moment.
Have there been conversations yet, and maybe it's a little early because South Beach Food and Wine Festival doesn't come until February, but have there been conversations about what that might look like come February?
We had some internal preliminary conversations. So the South Beach Wine Food Festival has a lot of support from the local restaurants around Miami and Palm Beach and Broward County. So we're looking at scenarios now, and what happens if the support drops, where we have to go to replace some of the funding and some of the sponsorship. So those are the kind of conversations we're having today. We remain optimistic that we want to continue to do this festival because it does bring in revenue to the city, and it does help with tourism taxes. So we're being optimistic, and we hope we can continue to do it.
Sure, absolutely. And Connie, what about you? What do you see coming longer term than the next month for restaurants and the food and beverage?
Right. So currently, we're also working on a recovery plan, if you will, from the Convention and Visitors Bureau. Our job is we're the marketing agency, if you will, as far as tourism. We help bring in conventions and various things related to tourism So in the midst of all this, like as Michael was saying, we're optimistic that things are going to recover. And so we have been working on on a recovery plan, and at the right time, we'll roll that out fully. But I think under that plan, this Miami Eats program has been, pretty successful. We'll continue that. The restaurants love Miami Spice. Hopefully all of you will love it. So, how Miami Spice may come into play this year, we're all not sure. As Dr. Chang said, we're still discovering. However, if there is a way to do that, and a way to help the restaurants because they love it during the normal season, we'll work that in as well. So we're looking at things like that to continue to promote that. Even if travel from the outside is not as prevalent, there's travel within the region that can promote that. And then again, we might be eating out a long time here to help the restaurants as local, but maybe that's what we have to do. In addition to that, we'll continue our website with the information, some of the things that FIU is doing, of course, the DDA as well. We'll keep those things going for restaurants, and we want to be a continued conduit for resources. One of the things that we do under the multicultural platform is we have what's called our tourism business enhancement program, and we work with businesses throughout the year on business development, if you will. We partner with the Miami Bayside Foundation, and we also host programs to help businesses. I am sure that this year, in addition to some of the businesses, will focus in on some of those restaurants to continue that training and education and just things to help make the business better during this recovery time. I think that what we're seeing is all these great resources that are complementary that normally a restaurant or business couldn't get during normal times. Mm-hmm. Everybody's really honing in on those. So we want to be just as helpful in the upcoming months for providing education programming as well.
Thanks, Connie. And Kevin, what is the DDA looking at 3-4 months from now?
Yeah, so we actually recently formed a business recovery task force with different stakeholders within our district from a variety of disciplines to guide policy going forward. So I think kind of to summarize what Michael and Connie said is the situation is fluid. Yes. It depends how and when things open up. The simple answer is no one knows what's going to happen. 2 weeks ago, no one knew when we were going to open up, and now all of a sudden we're opening up in some capacity throughout the state. So things change very, very quickly. And we don't think it's prudent to plan 4 months out for something we don't know is going to happen next week. So it's very, very important that we continue to talk to our different partners, to talk directly to the restaurants and the bars. We and any other organization for that matter is only as good as the information we have. So we have to stay on top of everything that's going on. We have to communicate, and then also working with our partners. From what I've seen so far, and it's been pretty remarkable, usually when there's partnerships, whatever the initiative, it winds up being much more impactful. So if you look at the hospitality fund that we teamed up with FIU, there's no way we could have done that alone. We don't have the resources, both in terms of manpower or dollars. And so that's an example of that. GMCVB is going to do the Miami Shines program, which is going to be marketing and showcasing our hospitality sector. We're going to team up with them on that. So that's another example. So basically forming partnerships, staying on top of information, and keeping those lines of communication open.
Thanks, Kevin. Well, I wanted to open it up to questions from our audience. And one of the questions I saw in the chat from Alona was, what solutions do restaurant owners see as it pertains to addressing social distancing in particular? Maybe if any of the panelists have any thoughts, or anyone else on the chat today could jump in as well.
Ryan, you're a co-owner. I'd love to hear your feedback.
Yeah, it's a really good question. And for us, perhaps a little early in terms of our thought process. I think even if we were to see some of the relaxation of some of the closures in South Florida, which I don't think we're seeing yet, we would probably wait longer to get a feel for what's working and what doesn't work. I mean, I think spacing out tables is a sort of no-brainer, and it's going to be probably required. And maybe you have to sort of meter who can come in and at what times, and relying heavily on reservations versus, walk-ins might not really be as much of a thing in this environment because we need to space out tables. make sure that our servers have the opportunity to, clean between, serving different tables. It's so hard to figure out what a restaurant dining room looks like in this environment. So I think we're probably going to take it slower, but I'd be curious, maybe some of the other folks in restaurants that are on this can jump in as well with their thoughts. I know it's always hard with a large group because no one wants to speak up. So anyone else have any questions that they want to ask any of the panelists?
I would say you're probably very correct in waiting to see and probably wise to do so. And it's just based on my feedback and having seen the draft of what's been proposed. And I mean, holy smokes, it's written from a public health angle, which I understand the need to, right? But it's just, I don't know that a smaller independent restaurant has the financial resources to implement everything that's on that list. And it's a long list too. It's like, wow. So I think it's gonna take some ingenuity and creativity for as the restaurateurs, the ones who attempt it, say, okay, I learned this is not necessary. And maybe a week later on, they figured, okay, we can scratch off this one because people are not really, it's not posing to be a problem, but maybe we need to focus on something else. Maybe it's the messaging and the appearance of sanitation that's more important, so I'm not sure.
Ryan, and one of the things that's come up in kind of the prior conversations and just how we've thought about the passport program in general is thinking a little bit about the role of technology. And I know each of you talked about the shift from in-person to really utilizing some of the mobile applications and the interfaces that are available to make social distancing takeout more feasible. But I'd love to hear from the panelists and of course yourself, how you all are thinking about the disparities in access to some of these technologies and maybe restaurant POS systems that are a little bit more sophisticated, how that's looking across the board in Miami-Dade. I'm thinking about folks in Overtown where there's a couple of restaurants and maybe parts of the community like North Miami where there may not be that level of sophistication to be able to quickly onboard some of these really helpful technology pieces.
Yeah, in my experience, the high-tech POS systems are usually shifting from a model where you own your POS system to you're paying a monthly fee. I think I see the benefit financially to the companies that sell those systems. They're great products, many of them. However, it's a much more expensive product, especially long-term. So I know a lot of restaurants who already own legacy systems or who are trying to avoid another monthly expense for a restaurant that can't take on much more, aren't going to be turning to those types of systems. We have transitioned to those types of systems because of the services that they offer. And I see the benefit. It's great, especially in this environment where you're trying to avoid as much contact in terms of online ordering and just some of the ease of use. But they're not going to be widely available for restaurants that don't have the luxury of being able to take on another $100, $150 a month expense. So I guess if any of the panelists have worked on with some of those companies or thoughts on this, I'd be curious.
I want to say just in working a lot with some of the businesses in our neighborhoods, I definitely understand what you're saying because, that could be the difference on whether you're able to keep yourself going or not during this time because it's already hard enough. I think, honestly, what will happen is there will need to be an assessment of those key things after this. And a lot of times, we see various companies and corporations in sessions that hone in on areas of need for some of the communities and businesses that need those. So hopefully during this whole process, there'll be an awareness of this, and those players that can maybe even help assist in these areas will take note. I think it's up to people even like me and those that work in our neighborhoods to kind of jot these things down, because later when you have an opportunity to sit down with the key people and say, well, what are the needs for our restaurants in those heritage neighborhoods, as we call them, we all have an idea of what they are. Because some of the mainstream businesses will be able to continue because they have that access. but some of those small businesses, which really are the mom and pop businesses, which really are the fabric of the community, won't be able to continue, and we don't want to lose them.
Yeah, that's a great point. I know we're getting some questions in via the chat as well. I don't know if, Paulina, do we have to unmute people as we go, or can they unmute themselves?
I can unmute, so maybe we can go with Kevin's question and I can unmute him so he can say it out loud. Hi, Kevin. There, you're unmuted.
I just posted in the chat channel because I'm running a food truck, and I do notice in the food truck community, a lot of the truck owners start trying to restart their business and they're moving around. And I think a food truck is a little bit easier than a regular restaurant because for us, we just need to have a self-ordering kind of masters ready. And then we can, if we move to locations, we can turn the fashion to be the user just order online, and once the order is ready, we just text them and come over and pick it up. So we can actually do the crowd control. I talked with some of the owners, and we're talking about as long as we have space, we can actually set up several tables for pickup and measure the distance of tables. But the toughest part for those mobile vendors is, since we are not location based before, we really rely on the events, the bigger traffic generator like hospitals, parks, bigger complex, and all of them are kind of either fully shut down or kind of closed to the outsiders. So I'm just wondering, is that, I mean, that sounds like a solution that if we can have a higher level plan that we have several locations available for mobile vendors. And because a lot of locations, I do notice that a lot of locations are closed. I mean, they're not highly utilized. So maybe we can bridge those resources, and these locations can be temporarily used by the mobile vendors, and we can control the number of vendors, and in order to control the crowd, but also have those mobile vendors back to the business. And also I noticed that all those trucks and trailers builder, they have problem, and they are give good deals if any restaurant would like to go mobile, and they're even cut their price like 30% off to build a new trailer and stuff. So I'm thinking, is this a possible solution for the local business?
Yeah,
So
it's interesting. Kevin, I hadn't thought about the fact that you guys are very reliant on events, which are obviously going to be negatively impacted, but you have this sort of mobile business that in a lot of ways seems really appealing right now. So I think we're all spending a lot more time and effort chasing fewer dollars now. And I think that's probably reflected in what you're describing, which is you have to work harder to get to fewer people, which isn't obviously a recipe for success. So, you know, I don't know if any of the panelists have been talking to food truck operators or are familiar with, you know, that space, but I'd be curious if you guys have any thoughts on the impact on that industry in particular.
No, you know, I want to go back to what we talked about briefly earlier, is the collaboration and the partnership piece. And I'm wondering, in Kevin's case, if he could, let's say you work out the Nemo area or the Wynwood area, if you started talking to the restaurateurs out there who are delivering their stuff through Uber Eats or Postmate or whichever one of those guys, maybe your items could show up on their menu and they get a percentage of it. So then it gives you access to be able to get your product to those restaurants when the customer orders from them as an add-on. So then, you know, it's really, you're spreading out, like you said, you're having multiple locations within the neighborhood, of course. So there might be an option for you to get a little bit more revenue.
And I think to further Dean Cheng's point, there's kind of interesting concepts that have floated out there. One that I had thought about that we've kind of talked about was this idea of you know, the mobile food hall. You see things like Time Out or different food halls that have various restaurants in a small space, but there's an opportunity for leveraging partnerships with local government around this idea of a mobile food hall where you get the address set up for the purpose of delivery and return, and then you can have, you know, the different food trucks stationed at particular hubs or spots where they can be able to have the delivery access to as well.
Yeah.
And it seems like there's maybe an opportunity for some technology to step in and help with sort of organizing that and marketing that. So hopefully some of this, you know, will spring up new ideas and new companies that can support that.
Mm-hmm.
Were there other questions? I think in the chat, Alona, I think you had some follow-up question as well.
Yeah. First of all, I want to thank all of you. I think this is a really timely conversation, and I find all the information that you're sharing very valuable. So thank you so much for organizing and your time. I had heard about this concept of tables waiting for people versus people waiting for tables. So an idea for restaurants to reopen was kind of taking it slowly, right? And controlling the amount of people that come into your restaurant. So more than just having a reservation, you have an appointment to eat, and the restaurant will let you in, you know, and keep you in a controlled environment until you're done. And I just was curious to know what your thoughts are, if that is a potential solution for the short term.
I think it's interesting. I think the relationship between diners and restaurants is going to evolve. I think now diners are going to look to restaurants to ensure health and safety more than before. I think we always sort of were mindful of clean restaurants and dirty restaurants, but it's much more serious now. So I think things like the appointments that you've described, or feeling like you're entrusting the restaurant with your health and safety for that period of time, it's going to become much more front and center. So I think that's a great idea, and we have to look at other ways that we can meter out who's coming into the restaurants and for how long. But, you know, at the end of the day, no one's going to want to come to restaurants if they're not enjoying themselves. You know, I think the beauty of restaurants is that you provide a gathering place. It's not that people are coming there only because of the food. And if we lose everything else and all we have is the food, then, you know, takeout and delivery makes more sense at that point than coming in, especially in this environment. So hopefully we don't lose the sort of soul of the restaurants.
Ryan, I think you're right. I think that there will be some standards that all restaurants will have to do during this time. But I think what's going to happen is each venue, each restaurant, each bar, each diner will have to kind of pull back, look at their space and their place and the egress and ingress, and come up with a plan that's really, it won't look like the next place. Because there are some restaurants that have the capacity, say if the capacity is 200. Well, how they structure, they can still have a nice crowd, they can still social distance and still be able to manage. But the next space that's more of a smaller space, how you do that's going to be, it's going to be different. Not that it can't be done, but the creative spirit will really have to come out. So, you know, I think each restaurant, to your point, will have to be different, but the goal, you got to create an environment that people want to come. You know what I'm saying? It's got to you got to kind of figure that out.
Yeah, I think to Connie's point and to your point, Ryan, about the soul of the experience, you know, Venture Cafe, we gathered 250 to 350 people in person, and we had to switch that entire thing online. And one of the biggest concerns was, you know, will people still feel the magic of human connectivity and the magic that happens when you're able to kind of randomly run into people you didn't expect to run into over a beer at the bar, because we're all virtually. And so I'm curious for all of the panelists, Ryan included, if you could probably give some advice, or if you're looking, you know, 5 years into the future, you know, what's some advice you would give to food and beverage founders and entrepreneurs about how to innovate, how to think differently about their experience and their service, and even the way that they communicate the value offering that they're providing through their particular restaurant?
Who wants to kick that off? Dean Chang?
I was going to defer to you, Ryan. I do think communication is key. I think we're going to learn a lot from this. And I think before we go back to opening fully, the whole communicating about how safe it is for you to come in is going to be key. You know, just implementing measures and then nobody ever see those things doesn't help. You got to tell the world, hey, we did this, we sanitized, you know, 15,000 times a day. People want to hear that and they want to read that. So I think that's really key.
Mm-hmm. I'd like to chime in. Yeah, I'd like to chime in too. I think on top of that, it's about forming relationships, especially if you are a local establishment. Not only communicating the safety, but basically having the patrons have a place that they call home in their neighborhood, whatever that may be. Those are the people that are going to support you. So that's from a patron standpoint. That's from whatever, if you're in a bid, work with the bid. If you're in the DDA, work with the DDA, work with the GMCVB, Chamber of Commerce, anyone, you know, people that get involved tend to do better than people who try to go at it alone. Not to say it can't happen. Maybe the food's really good. But generally speaking, those that survive are because people really love and cherish them.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with both of those things. I know that this will pass, but I don't know about the rest of y'all. When I go out and do the essential errands and things, it feels a little awkward, because when you go in and you have to, of course, social distance, so you're kind of avoiding people with the mask on. You don't know if they're smiling or they're not smiling. You almost feel like, you know, you're on such a mission that you really have to lose a little bit of your character, your personality, and things like that. So I guess I would say to your question, maybe as we move through this, restaurants can figure out how they can still have the vibe and the feel, even though we'll have these things that have to continue, the mask and those things for a while. How can they do that? Is it something visual that they put in their wall that says, we're smiling even though we have on masks, please know you're welcome, or whatever that is? But I think a restaurant and any business will have to be proactive in trying to make that, because right now it's not natural. I mean, mainly because honestly, if we have to continue to wear the mask, you can't see your face as much. So you don't know what those expressions are, those warm welcomes, those smiles. So I think that's something that a restaurant will have to think about and proactively and deliberately do things to make sure people know that they're welcome.
Agreed. Well, I wanted to thank the panelists for the last few minutes. I think Leanne is going to jump in and talk about the passport program. Make sure you guys have the information that you need. It sounds like a really fantastic program. So thank you again to each of you, and I'll turn it over to Leanne.
Thanks so much, Ryan, Michael, Kevin, and Connie. I love these conversations because they're informal, but also super helpful, because I feel like I learned so much about a lot of resources that I didn't even know were available to food and beverage entrepreneurs. And that's great for us to be able to then share. And I think highlights, I love the collaboration aspect that each of you touched on, thinking about the importance of working together. I think there's an African proverb that says, if you want to go farther, you can go together. And if you don't want to get very far, you'll go alone. And I think finally, you know, talking a little bit more about the role of innovation, because the topic for today was all about getting out of survival mode. And I think to survive in a crisis and beyond it and thrive, you got to think about pivoting, being innovative, and not a new normal, but what new normal you can create in terms of the new type of experience, given the circumstances, not ignoring the bad and ugly facts, but embracing them and really thinking about how you overcome them or just build them into your model and make it work for the value of the customer. These are all values, I think, and lenses through which we're thinking about better serving food and beverage entrepreneurs. And I know, Nina, if you want to just pop up a little bit about the Passport program for the last 2 minutes, there are 4 main pillars of things that Passport is designed to do. I think the first of which is connections. So many food and beverage entrepreneurs, and I know, Ryan, you could probably speak to this, the best opportunities often come through a door opened by someone that you know. And so thinking about how to leverage the social capital of the Venture Cafe network and our partners to create more doors of opportunity for entrepreneurs that, even through surviving this epidemic, can think about scaling maybe on different terms through new products or new services. The second piece is really getting best in class advice about operating. One of the elements of Passport is really thinking about how do we connect some of the best operators in the country with a cohort of food and beverage entrepreneurs to learn how to solve some of the challenges they might be having around operations so that they can operate at scale or expand with their business models. So the best example, and I keep putting it out there because I hope it happens, the individual who was able to take Chipotle across the country, having them fly down to Miami and spending a full day with 10 to 12 food and beverage entrepreneurs to really just show tactically and operationally, these are the things that I did. These are the strategies that we employ, and this is what works to get us to kind of, hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. And I think the third aspect is learning, learning in an environment where you don't have time. When you're running a restaurant, Ryan, I've been to Mignonette and I see how crazy it can be on any given night. Even if I go on like a Thursday night, it's busy, you're back and forth. I'm sure you're running numbers, you're doing projections, you're ordering your fresh seafood in. Nobody has time to take a step back and learn how to make their business better and how to improve. So giving a little bit of a retreat and respite for at least 3 days out of a quarter to be able to get some time to focus on the vision and the growth. And then finally, a little bit of a tour, going to a market that has really done some things differently for food and beverage founders, both on the product side and the restaurant side, to be able to get connected with investors, funders, and to look at examples of innovative things that have worked and perhaps been able to survive the economic downturn, to learn what can be applied to businesses. So we've shifted things a little bit, doing applications more on a rolling basis because, people are just thinking about getting through tomorrow, let alone getting through the fall. And all the programmatic pieces right now, in terms of the 3 master classes, the immersion tour, and the coaching sessions from local and national trainers, will take place in the fall. But we've got some great partners on board. Hopefully all the organizations on this call will also now become ecosystem partners for Passport. And basically it's Venture Cafe's offering to say, we're here for you, F&B entrepreneurs. We want to stack you with some resources generously powered by Knight Foundation. And so we want to encourage all the F&B entrepreneurs that are on this lunch break to consider applying. No charge, completely free. It's really about opening up doors of opportunity and creating additional forms of capital, social capital, relationship capital, access to new financial capital for Miami and South Florida based food and beverage founders. So if there are no questions, I don't see anything in the chat. We'll be happy to package this video and make it available for you in the VCM Video Vault. So that'll be available. We'll send a recap out to everybody that actually registered with all the links. Kevin will follow up with you with all of those links that you spouted off really quickly, and links to the profiles of our co-conversation leaders. So definitely want to thank you all for coming. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Dean Chang. Thank you, Kevin and Connie, and all the folks that were able to join us. And most importantly, Nina Paulina from Venture Cafe for putting this together.